The young champion had everything a fighter could dream of. He had speed, power, fame, and the belt around his waist that proved he was at the top of the UFC world. Reporters followed him everywhere, asking about his next fight, his training style, and his plans for the future. Fans cheered his name in packed arenas, holding up posters and chanting as he walked out under the bright lights. His rise had been fast, almost like a rocket shooting into the sky. He went from being an unknown athlete to a household name in just a few short years, and with every victory, his confidence grew bigger. Success, however, has a way of changing people. At first, he was humble, thanking his coaches and supporters after his wins. He spoke about discipline, hard work, and never forgetting where he came from. But as the wins piled up and the interviews became more frequent, something inside him began to shift. The cameras, the cheers, and the praise made him feel untouchable. He started to believe he was not just the best in his weight class, but perhaps the greatest fighter the sport had ever seen. Everywhere he went, people wanted his autograph, his picture, or just a handshake. He enjoyed the attention. He enjoyed being recognized on the street, being stopped in restaurants, and hearing people whisper about him when he entered a room. He wasn't just an athlete anymore. He was a star. Yet, with stardom came pressure, the kind that made him want to keep proving himself. Not only inside the cage, but also in front of the world. Interviews became his stage. When the cameras turned on, he smiled confidently, often leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, speaking like he owned the room. Other fighters promoted their matches by talking about training and strategy, but he wanted more. He wanted headlines. He wanted to stand out, not just for his skills, but for his words. Slowly, his style of talking became more daring, and some would say more arrogant at first. It was directed at fighters in his own division. He claimed none of them could match his skills. He said they were too slow, too predictable, too weak compared to him. His words stirred emotions, making fans excited and drawing attention to his fights. But then, he started reaching further. He began comparing himself to fighters from the past, people who had paved the way for modern mixed martial arts. That was when his attitude began to bother many. In one particular interview, a reporter asked him about martial arts legends' names that inspired generations of fighters. Instead of showing respect, he laughed. He said those names were great in movies, but if they stepped into the cage with him today, they would stand no chance. That was the old style, he remarked, waving his hand as if brushing away history. We're in a new era now, and I'm the one leading it. Among the legends he mentioned was Chuck Norris, a man who was more than just a fighter. Chuck wasn't only famous for his action films, but also for his deep roots in martial arts, his discipline, and the respect he had earned from people around the world. Chuck represented strength, wisdom, and the spirit of true martial arts. But to the young champion, he was just another name to dismiss. During a press conference, after one of his title defenses, the young champion faced a room full of reporters. He leaned back in his chair, smiling as questions poured in. One reporter asked who, in his opinion, could challenge him. Instead of naming fighters from the current roster, he smirked and said, honestly, not even someone like Chuck Norris could handle me in the cage. The room went silent for a moment, surprised by the boldness of his words. Some reporters laughed awkwardly, others quickly scribbled notes. Within hours, the clips spread across social media. Fans debated fiercely online. Some found it amusing, saying the champion was just trying to stir attention. Others found it disrespectful, saying a legend like Chuck Norris should never be spoken about in such a dismissive way. The champion didn't seem to care. In fact, the more attention his comment received, the more he enjoyed it. He began repeating it in interviews, adding small jokes and playful insults. He knew it was keeping him in the headlines, and he thrived on that. In his mind, he was untouchable. He had beaten the best fighters in the world. No one could tell him otherwise. What he didn't realize was that his words were planting a seed of curiosity in people's minds. Fans started asking, what if Chuck Norris, even at his age, did step into the ring with this champion? Could discipline and experience match raw power and youth? Could the legend still surprise the world? The champion's team tried to remind him to stay focused on his training and not let the media game distract him, but he brushed off their advice. "Relax," he would say. "I've got this. I know what I'm doing." Every time he repeated his claim about Chuck Norris, he smiled with even more confidence, almost as if daring the legend to respond, and respond he did. To everyone's surprise, ChuckNorris.com, and composed as always, acknowledged the champion's words. He wasn't angry. He didn't throw back insults. Instead, he accepted the challenge, framing it not as a grudge match, but as an opportunity to remind people of what martial arts truly stood for: discipline, respect, and honor. The announcement shocked the sports world. News outlets picked up the story immediately. Commentators debated endlessly on television and online. Some argued it was just a publicity stunt. Others believed it would be a real test of ego versus experience. For the champion, however, it was another chance to shine. He didn't see it as a risk. He saw it as another stage to prove that he was untouchable, even against someone who had become larger than life in the eyes of millions. As the date of the exhibition match approached, the young champion carried himself with the same swagger as always. He posed for cameras, spoke boldly in interviews, and promised fans that it would be quick and easy. In his mind, there was no way a man who had been away from professional fighting for decades could stand against him. What he didn't realize was that the stage he had created was bigger than any fight he had faced before. This wasn't just about belts or rankings anymore. This was about pride, respect, and the timeless question of whether youth and arrogance could truly overshadow wisdom and legacy. The moment the champion mentioned Chuck Norris's name, the story began to take on a life of its own. At first, it was just another bold comment to add to his long list of interviews. But this time, something felt different. The internet picked it up quickly, and within hours, short clips of the champion's statement were spreading everywhere. Fans from all around the world were talking about it. Some laughed at the champion's arrogance, saying he was just stirring up drama for attention. Others felt a spark of curiosity. What would happen if a legend like Chuck Norris actually stepped into the cage with him? The young champion, sitting at the center of the storm, felt thrilled. This was exactly what he wanted: attention, headlines, and endless conversation about his name. Every time he scrolled through his phone, he saw people tagging him, creating memes, and debating whether his words were bold or disrespectful. To him, it didn't matter. Positive or negative, it was all publicity. In his mind, the louder people talked, the brighter his star shined. Television networks soon joined in. Sports analysts brought up the clip and began dissecting it. Some shook their heads, saying the champion was being careless with his words. They reminded viewers of Chuck Norris's achievements in martial arts, his black belts, and his years of training under masters across the world. Others, however, leaned into the entertainment value. They asked playful questions. Could Chuck still surprise us? Or is this the showdown we never knew we needed? The champion loved it. For the first time, his name was being spoken not just by UFC fans, but by people far outside the fighting world. Movie fans, martial arts enthusiasts, and even casual viewers were suddenly invested in what he had said. The call-out had crossed over into mainstream culture, and when something reaches that level, it becomes unstoppable. What nobody expected was for Chuck Norris himself to respond. The legend had been living a quieter life, away from the chaos of Hollywood and the spotlight of his earlier years. When reporters reached out to him, they half expected him to laugh it off or simply ignore it. But Chuck surprised everyone. With his calm, steady voice, he replied in a short statement that shook the conversation even further. He didn't mock the champion. He didn't return the insults. Instead, he said, "If the young man truly wishes to test himself, I'm open to a friendly exhibition. Not for pride, not for anger, but for the love of martial arts." The statement spread across the globe in minutes. Fans who had grown up watching Chuck's movies cheered. Younger audiences who only knew him through jokes and stories suddenly paid attention. The idea of Chuck Norris stepping back into a ring, even in an exhibition, felt surreal. It wasn't just a fight, it was a meeting of eras. a bridge between the old ways of martial arts and the new style of mixed combat. The champion, of course, was overjoyed. He saw this as the ultimate proof that he was untouchable. "Look at this," he told reporters during his next press conference, leaning forward with a grin. "I've made the legend come out of retirement just to face me. That says everything about my power." His confidence was unshaken. Every question he answered came with the same air of superiority. He promised the match would end quickly. He joked about finishing it before the crowd could even settle into their seats. Behind the scenes, his coaches and training partners urged him to take the exhibition seriously. They knew Chuck Norris wasn't just a movie star. He was a real martial artist, with decades of discipline. They reminded him that even if Chuck was older now, his timing, precision, and experience could not be underestimated. But the champion brushed off their concerns. "Relax," he said with a laugh. "This will be fun. Easy work." As the announcement became official, excitement spread everywhere. Tickets sold out in record time. Fans traveled from all over, hoping to witness the match. News outlets covered it as though it were the biggest event of the year. Advertisers lined up to be a part of it. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when youthful arrogance faced seasoned wisdom in the weeks leading up to the event. The contrast between the two men became even clearer. The champion posted videos of his flashy training sessions. He hit pads with explosive power, sparred with teammates while grinning, and showed off his athleticism on camera. His social media was filled with bold captions like "First round, no problem," and "Legends are great, but I'm the present." Chuck, on the other hand, kept things simple. He released only a few short clips of his training. There were no flashy movements, no loud music, no boasts. In one clip, he was seen practicing slow, controlled techniques in a quiet gym. In another, he calmly stretched and focused on breathing exercises. The contrast was striking. To some, it seemed like Chuck was not preparing enough. But to others, it was a reminder of what true discipline looked like: calm, steady, and humble. As the date drew closer, the energy surrounding the match grew even stronger. Talk shows invited guests to discuss it. Old fight footage of Chuck's martial arts competitions resurfaced online, showing younger generations that he had once been a true competitor, not just a movie hero. Meanwhile, the champion doubled down on his boldness. During one media event, he even mimicked Chuck's famous roundhouse kick, laughing as he demonstrated it in an exaggerated way. The audience chuckled, but many viewers at home felt it crossed a line. The night before the event, the champion stayed up late doing interviews. He told reporters again that it would be quick. He promised fans they would see the easiest victory of his career. He was so certain of his success that he barely slept, instead spending the night scrolling through the endless online chatter about the fight. For him, this wasn't just a match, it was the biggest stage of his life. Chuck, however, spent the evening differently. He avoided the cameras. He stayed in his hotel room, quietly meditating and reviewing his techniques. For him, it wasn't about the cameras or the attention. It was about the principle. He wanted to show the world that martial arts was more than power, and speed. It was about respect, balance, and control. When the morning of the fight arrived, the difference between the two men was clear. The champion walked into the arena smiling widely, waving to the crowd, shouting promises of an easy win. His confidence was unshaken. Chuck arrived quietly, head slightly bowed, shaking hands with those he passed, offering polite smiles. The crowd roared for both men, though the cheers for Chuck carried a nostalgic warmth, as though people were welcoming back an old friend. The stage was set. What had started as a simple, offhand comment had grown into one of the most talked-about events in combat sports history. The champion believed it was his moment to shine brighter than ever. Chuck, calm and steady, believed it was his moment to remind the world of what true martial arts stood for. The world held its breath, waiting to see what would unfold when the two men finally stepped into the cage. The arena was glowing under bright lights, buzzing with energy that could almost be felt in the air. Fans filled every seat, waving banners and shouting names. Camera flashes lit up the stands, and the commentators' voices boomed as they prepared the audience for what everyone had been waiting for: This was not just another match on the schedule, it was the clash between youthful confidence and timeless experience. The champion made his entrance first. Music blared through the speakers as he walked toward the cage with his team behind him. He wore a confident smile, bouncing lightly on his feet, raising his arms to pump up the crowd. Every step he took showed his belief that he was about to deliver the easiest performance of his life. Fans in the front rows reached out their hands, and he slapped a few of them playfully, grinning as though the night was already his victory party. When he stepped into the cage, he paced back and forth, nodding, loosening his shoulders, and throwing a few practice punches into the air. His eyes scanned the crowd, soaking in their cheers. In his mind, this was his stage, his spotlight. And Chuck Norris was just another guest in his story. Then the lights dimmed slightly, and the announcer's voice echoed as Chuck Norris's name was called. The arena erupted with cheers, not the wild, rowdy shouts of excitement for a young star, but the deep, heartfelt roars of respect for a man who had inspired generations. Chuck walked out calmly, no music louder than the crowd itself. His steps were steady, his face composed, almost as if he had done this 1,000 times before. He didn't wave his arms or show off his energy. Instead, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing left to prove. The contrast between the two men could not have been greater. On one side stood the champion, bouncing, grinning, full of energy. On the other side stood Chuck, calm, relaxed, almost serene. He stepped into the cage slowly, bowed his head slightly toward the audience, then nodded politely to the champion. The crowd roared even louder, as if they understood the silent message. This was not about ego, but about respect for the art itself. When the referee brought them together for the pre-match instructions, the champion smirked, keeping his eyes locked on Chuck. He tapped his gloves loudly, almost mocking, while Chuck simply lifted his gloves with a small nod. The difference in attitude was striking, and even the commentators whispered about it. "Look at the composure of Chuck Norris," one of them said. "And look at the energy of the champion. It's like two completely different worlds colliding tonight." The bell rang for the first round, and the arena shook with noise. The champion immediately bounced forward, light on his toes, circling Chuck, testing the distance. He threw a few quick jabs into the air, more to show off his speed than to land anything meaningful. Chuck stayed still, his eyes locked on his opponent, his movements minimal, conserving energy. The champion's confidence grew with every second. He darted in and out, swinging lightly, throwing playful punches that stopped just short of Chuck's guard. He grinned, looking at the crowd, as if to say, "See? He can't touch me." Fans shouted and clapped, some cheering him, others waiting for Chuck's response. Then the champion lunged forward with his first serious attempt, fast combination of strikes. The crowd gasped as Chuck barely moved his head to the side, avoiding them with ease. He didn't rush. He didn't counter. He simply let the punches miss and returned to his calm stance. It was almost as if he was inviting the champion to keep going. The champion laughed, shaking his head. He tapped his chest, signaling that Chuck had gotten lucky. Then he pressed forward again, this time more aggressively. He circled, feinted, and threw another flurry of punches. Again, Chuck's defense was calm, precise, and effortless. A small sidestep here, a block there, no wasted energy. No panic. Minutes into the round, the crowd began to notice the difference. The champion was working hard, bouncing, swinging, and constantly moving. Chuck, meanwhile, remained centered, controlled, like a rock in the middle of a storm. The energy in the arena shifted slightly. Some fans began chanting Chuck's name, while others urged the champion to push harder. The champion, feeling the pressure, decided it was time to end the game. He charged in with full force, throwing a strong strike, certain that this would break through. But in that very moment, Chuck moved with speed that surprised everyone. With perfect timing, he sidestepped and tapped the champion's shoulder lightly, redirecting his momentum. The champion stumbled slightly, not hurt, but clearly caught off guard. The crowd erupted in cheers, not because it was a damaging move, but because it showed Chuck's sharp timing and awareness. The champion's smile faded for the first time. He quickly reset his stance, trying to cover up his surprise, but the audience had already seen it. Chuck had reminded everyone, including the champion, that he was not there to be an easy target. The champion tried again, this time with a kick, sharp and fast. Chuck raised his guard and blocked it effortlessly, then stepped forward just enough to close the distance. He didn't throw a strike, but the champion instinctively stepped back, suddenly cautious. That tiny moment, a simple step, spoke volumes. The energy shifted once more, and the crowd roared with excitement. The first round continued with this rhythm, the champion attacking wildly, Chuck defending with calm precision. Every miss by the champion made the crowd cheer louder for Chuck. Every block, every sidestep, every subtle move reminded the world that discipline and timing were just as powerful as speed and strength. By the end of the round, the champion was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling with effort. His face was still determined, but his grin was gone. Chuck, on the other hand, stood tall, hardly out of breath, his expression as calm as it had been at the start. The referee called for a pause, and the two men went back to their corners. The crowd was electric. Commentators spoke quickly, analyzing what had just happened. The champion came in hot, but look at the way Chuck handled it, one said. He's conserving energy, waiting for the perfect moment. That was a masterclass in patience, another added. This young man thought it would be easy, but you can see it in his face. He knows now this is not what he expected. As the champion sat down on his stool, his coaches spoke quickly, telling him to stay composed, to stop underestimating Chuck, but the look in his eyes told the story. His confidence had been shaken. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't waving at the crowd. For the first time in a long time, he realized he might be in a real test. Chuck sat quietly in his corner, sipping water slowly, listening to his coach's calm reminders. He didn't need much advice. He already knew his strategy. He wasn't fighting for glory or for pride. He was fighting to teach a lesson, one that was slowly unfolding before the eyes of millions. The first round had ended, but the story was only just beginning. The second round began with an energy that felt different from the first. The champion, still full of confidence, but slightly more cautious after the first round, bounced lightly on his feet. He glanced at Chuck Norris, expecting the same calm, slow movements he had seen before. But now, there was something else in Chuck's quiet focus that seemed sharper than before. The audience noticed it too. The cheers were louder, as if everyone knew something special was about to happen. The champion circled, his movements deliberate this time. He had learned that rushing too quickly might make him lose control. He threw a few light jabs, testing the distance and timing once more. Chuck barely moved, watching carefully, his posture relaxed, yet ready. It was like a game of Chesuch man measuring the other, waiting for the right moment to act. The champion decided to increase his pace. He moved in with a series of attacks, faster than before, trying to overwhelm Chuck with speed and agility. He threw punches, kicks, and quick feints, hoping to catch the legend off guard. But Chuck's calmness didn't falter. Every strike was met with precision. He blocked or avoided each movement with minimal effort, using the champion's energy against him. Every dodge and parry looked effortless, almost like an art form. The crowd was captivated. They cheered louder with each exchange, not just for the action, but for the story unfolding. The young champion, who had once been confident he would finish the match quickly, was now experiencing something entirely new. Every move Chuck made reminded him that experience and discipline could surpass raw energy and youthful strength. Frustration began to show on the champion's face. He had trained hard, prepared for months, and believed in his ability to defeat anyone in the cage. Yet here was a man, older and calmer, who seemed to move with purpose and control, never wasting a single motion. The champion realized that his usual strategy, quick, aggressive attacks, would not work this time. He needed to think, adjust, and learn, and that was something he had never needed to do before in a fight. Seeing the shift in the champion, Chuck decided it was time to introduce subtle pressure. He didn't attack recklessly. Instead, he moved closer, using small steps and controlled movements to influence the champion's positioning. With a gentle push, or a strategic sidestep, he guided the champion around the cage, showing him that strength alone could not dictate the fight. The champion tried to resist, but he could feel himself being drawn into Chuck's rhythm. At one point, the champion attempted a powerful kick, hoping to surprise Chuck and break his composure. Chuck blocked it easily and, with a small pivot, shifted the champion off balance. It wasn't forceful or aggressive. It was calculated, almost like a teacher correcting a student. The champion stumbled slightly, a clear reminder that overconfidence could be dangerous. The audience erupted in applause, not for the strike itself, but for the lesson it represented. The champion reset his stance and breathed deeply. Realizing that he had underestimated Chuck's timing and precision, he had expected a simple match, one he could finish quickly, and instead, he was learning humility in real time. Chuck's calm presence, careful movements, steady focus were teaching him more than any training session ever could. For the next few minutes, the round became a dance of contrasts. The champion moved with speed and energy, constantly shifting, attacking, and feinting. Chuck moved with patience, observing, guiding, and waiting for the perfect opportunity to act. Every dodge, every block, every small step by Chuck seemed simple, yet it was executed with perfect timing and intention. The champion began to understand that this was not about winning in seconds or scoring quick points. It was about respect, strategy, and the understanding that martial arts was more than just physical ability. The audience was completely absorbed. Every movement, every adjustment, every pause carried meaning. People in the stands leaned forward, unable to look away. Commentators spoke quickly, explaining how the champion was learning a valuable lesson in real time. "You can see it on his face," one said. "He expected an easy match, but now he's realizing that experience and control are just as powerful as speed and strength." Despite the challenges, the champion did not give up. He adjusted his approach, slowing down slightly, focusing on timing instead of brute force. He tried to read Chuck's movements, anticipating his steps and matching his rhythm. Each attempt brought small successes. He landed a few gentle touches and managed to hold his ground momentarily. But Chuck's experience always gave him a slight edge, a subtle correction, a movement that reminded the champion that he still had much to learn. As the round progressed, the champion's confidence slowly shifted into a mixture of determination and respect. He realized that this was not a fight about ego anymore. It was a lesson. Chuck's presence was teaching him humility, focus, and patience. For the first time, the champion felt what it meant to truly face a master, someone who had not just trained the body, but honed the mind, heart, and spirit through years of disciplined practice. Towards the middle of the round, the champion tried a different tactic. Instead of charging forward, he maintained distance, testing Chuck's reactions with smaller, precise movements. Chuck responded with the same calm, measured approach, always aware of the champion's energy and intentions. The subtle exchanges became almost a conversation, silent yet meaningful. Each man was speaking in a language of movement, learning from the other without words. The audience, sensing the significance, watched in awe. They realized this was more than a match. It was a masterclass in skill, patience, and respect. Fans who had come expecting a quick, flashy fight were now witnessing something far greater. They were seeing the young champion grow, adapt, and learn in real time. They were seeing Chuck Norris demonstrate that true mastery comes from balance, focus, and self-control. As the final moments of the round approached, the champion felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. His muscles were tired, his breathing heavy, yet his mind was alive with new understanding. He had expected to dominate, to impress, and perhaps even humiliate Chuck. Instead, he had been humbled in a harsh or aggressive way, but with subtlety, patience, and precision. The champion realized that victory was not just about landing blows, it was about wisdom, timing, and respect. When the bell rang to end the second round, both men stepped back to their corners. The champion sat down, breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his brow, but a new expression was on his face. It was a mixture of respect, reflection, and determination. Chuck sat quietly, sipping water, calm as ever, knowing that the lesson was taking hold. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering for both men, celebrating not just the action, but the story that had unfolded before them. The commentators summarized the round for viewers at home. The champion came in full of confidence, expecting an easy fight. But Chuck Norris has shown him and all of us the value of experience, patience, and discipline. This is more than a match. It's a lesson in humility and growth. Back in the locker room, the champion replayed the round in his mind. He reflected on every movement, every moment where Chuck had corrected him, guided him, or subtly reminded him of the importance of control. He understood that this experience would change him not just as a fighter, but as a person. For the first time, he saw that true mastery was not about strength. Speed or fame, it was about wisdom, preparation, and respect. Chuck, meanwhile, returned to his quiet space, smiling faintly. He knew that he had fulfilled his goal for the round. The young champion had faced a challenge far greater than he expected, and was now learning lessons that could shape the rest of his career. It was not a moment of victory for Chuck, nor was it about defeating someone else. It was about teaching, guiding, and sharing knowledge, showing the world the true essence of martial arts. The final round began with a different energy in the arena. The champion, though still young and strong, carried a new respect in his movements. The first 2 rounds had changed him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He no longer approached the fight with pure confidence and bravado. Instead, he moved carefully, thinking through each step, each strike, and each adjustment. The audience immediately noticed the shift. The champion who had once bounced across the cage, brimming with energy and arrogance, now showed a thoughtful, cautious presence. Chuck Norris, as always, remained calm, his movements deliberate and precise. He didn't rush. He didn't taunt. His eyes, steady and focused, watched the champion like a teacher observing a student. There was no desire to dominate or humiliate away, a desire to guide and demonstrate the value of discipline. This balance between confidence and calmness made the final round feel almost ceremonial, like a lesson unfolding in real time before millions of people. The champion circled slowly. Testing the distance between himself and Chuck, he threw small jabs. Not to overwhelm, but to understand the rhythm and timing of his opponent. Every movement he made was purposeful. He had learned that rushing could leave him vulnerable. Experience had taught him that Chuck's calmness was a weapon in itself. The young champion realized that he had entered this fight thinking it would be an easy victory. But now he understood it was an opportunity to grow. The crowd was completely captivated. They cheered for both men, sensing the meaning behind every movement. Some fans had come expecting a flashy, quick fight. Instead, they witnessed a story of growth, humility, and respect unfold in front of their eyes. The champion's expressions, his moments of hesitation, his careful strikes, all of it spoke volumes. The audience began to cheer, not just for the action, but for the transformation taking place inside the cage. Chuck moved closer, patiently waiting for the champion to make the next move. The young fighter attempted a series of kicks and punches, each executed with precision, yet tempered by the understanding that this was not about raw strength. Chuck responded with calm blocks and subtle movements, gently guiding the champion without causing harm. It was a delicate balance of skill and respect. The audience could see the careful interaction, the push and pull of experience meeting youth. The champion paused briefly, breathing heavily, sweat dripping from his forehead. His mind raced with new realizations. For the first time, he saw that his speed, power, and agility were not the only measures of success. Timing, patience, and control mattered just as much. He recognized that Chuck's calm, disciplined approach was a demonstration of mastery that went far beyond physical ability. It was a lesson in focus, humility, and strategy. As the round continued, the champion made adjustments. He moved with more thoughtfulness, paying attention to Chuck's subtle cues. Each step was measured, each strike carefully considered. Slowly, he began to understand the rhythm of his opponent. He realized that this round was not about winning in seconds or landing the most blows. It was about learning. adapting and respecting the art of martial arts itself. Chuck, seeing the shift in the champion, responded accordingly. He maintained his calm demeanor, but increased his subtle teaching cues. A small movement here, a slight adjustment there, and the champion responded instinctively. It was almost as if they were having a silent conversation through their movements. The audience watched in awe, understanding that this was more than a fight, it was a lesson. A demonstration of what discipline, respect, and experience could teach. The champion attempted one more flurry, hoping to test his limits and push Chuck further. Chuck met each strike with calm precision, not out of aggression, but out of understanding. Every dodge, block, and pivot was a gentle reminder that mastery was not just about physical strength. The champion realized this with each passing second. He felt a sense of humility, acknowledging that there was still so much to learn. The audience cheered louder with each exchange. They saw the growth in the young champion and the wisdom in Chuck's approach. The final round had become a story of transformation. The champion, once arrogant and brimming with confidence, was now thoughtful, cautious, and respectful. Chuck, as always, remained the symbol of discipline and mastery, guiding his opponent without harshness. As the clock ticked down, the champion took a deep breath. He knew this was more than a fight, it was a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. He raised his gloves once more, not to attack recklessly, but to show his understanding and respect. Chuck nodded slightly, acknowledging the change in his opponent. It was a silent agreement, a recognition that the lesson had been received. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the match, both men lowered their gloves. The champion's face showed exhaustion, yes, but also reflection. He had been humbled, challenged, and educated all at once. Chuck, calm and composed as always, walked toward him and extended his hand. The champion, without hesitation, shook it firmly, bowing slightly in respect. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering for the moment of mutual respect and growth. The commentators were quick to summarize what had unfolded. This was never just about winning or losing, one said. It was a lesson in humility, discipline, and respect. The young champion has learned something invaluable tonight. Lessons that will stay with him far longer than any belt or trophy, another added. Chuck Norris has reminded us all that true mastery comes from patience, focus, and understanding, not just raw power. This match will be remembered not just for the action, but for the lessons it taught. Back in the locker rooms, the champion reflected on the experience. He replayed every moment in his mind, the calmness of Chuck, the subtle guidance, the way he had been tested not just physically but mentally. He realized that being a champion was not just about strength or speed. It was about learning, growing, and respecting the journey of others who came before him. He felt grateful, even though it had been challenging, the opportunity to face someone like Chuck Norris. Chuck, meanwhile, returned to his quiet space, smiling faintly. He knew that the young champion had learned valuable lessons that would shape his career and his character. It was never about showing dominance or winning. It was about passing on wisdom, teaching respect, and reminding the world of the true spirit of martial arts. Chuck's goal had been achieved not with force, but with patience, calm, and skill. In the weeks that followed, the story of the match spread across the world. Fans debated, shared clips, and praised both men. The young champion gained a new level of respect from his peers, not just for his athletic ability, but for his humility and willingness to learn. Chuck Norris received admiration once again, not for movies or celebrity, but for the demonstration of true mastery and character. The champion's perspective had changed forever. He returned to training with a renewed focus, no longer motivated solely by fame or titles, but by the understanding that growth, respect, and discipline were the true marks of a fighter. He carried the lessons learned into every practice, every match, and every interaction, knowing that the experience had made him stronger not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. The match between the young champion and Chuck Norris became legendary, not for the punches or kicks, but for the story of growth, humility, and respect. Fans continued to talk about it for years, sharing the story with friends, family, and new generations of martial arts enthusiasts. It was a reminder that strength alone does not define greatness, and that lessons can come from the most unexpected places. Years later, Champion would recall that night as a turning point in his life. He often spoke about it in interviews, explaining how facing Chuck Norris taught him the importance of patience, preparation, and respect. He emphasized that true victory was not always about defeating someone else, but about learning, growing, and becoming a better version of oneself. Chuck Norris, true to his calm and humble nature, rarely sought the spotlight for the event. Yet the match became one of the most talked about moments of his career, celebrated not for aggression or spectacle, but for wisdom and influence. He had reminded the world of the values he had lived by for decades: discipline, humility, and respect. The young champion's life, both inside and outside the cage, was forever changed. The arrogance that once defined him was replaced with a thoughtful, measured approach. He trained harder, fought smarter, and, most importantly, carried himself with respect for others and for the art of martial arts itself. The experience had left a mark not only on his career, but on his character. In the end, the match was not remembered as a simple fight. It was remembered as a story, a lesson, and a moment of transformation. The young champion learned that even the strongest and fastest could be humbled by wisdom and experience. Chuck Norris reminded the world that true mastery is shown through patience, respect, and teaching others. The event became a timeless example of growth, humility, and the enduring value of lessons learned in life.